In the heart of ancient Central Asia, where endless steppes stretch beneath a stormy sky, a queen rose not from legend, but from grief. Her name was Tomyris, a warrior queen of the Massagetae. She bore the weight of leadership with a mix of sorrow and fierce resolve. The man she faced was Cyrus the Great, ruler of the vast Persian Empire, a conqueror whose ambition knew no bounds. She did not seek war or glory. She sought justice for her son, taken not in battle, but by deceit. This is the story of how one woman's pain became the catalyst that brought down an empire and forever etched her name into history not as a wife or mother, but as a sovereign who dared to defy the greatest king of her time. To understand the fury that would one day bring down an empire, we must begin not with the queen, but with the man she would one day destroy. In the 6th century BCE, while Rome was little more than a provincial outpost and Athens was only beginning to speak of democracy, a different world power was rising in the east. The Persian Empire, vast, sophisticated, and unstoppable, was the creation of a single man, Cyrus II, better known to history as Cyrus the Great. But Cyrus was not great because of his armies alone. He was great because he understood how to rule the world. Unlike the brutal kings before him, Cyrus did not burn temples or erase cultures. When he conquered a land, he allowed the people to keep their gods, their customs, even their rulers so long as they bent the knee to him. When he entered Babylon, he did not sack the city. Instead, he freed the Jews from captivity and declared himself their protector. His actions were inscribed on clay in what is now known as the Cyrus Cylindera document. Some have called the first charter of human rights. But this mercy was not weakness. It was calculation. By respecting his subjects, Cyrus created loyalty. By liberating the oppressed, he gained legitimacy. Every act of kindness was a strategy, every tolerant decree a tool of control. And it worked. At its height, Cyrus's empire stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the mountains of India. No man before him had ruled over so many lands, so many languages, so many gods. He was not just a king. He was the axis upon which the world seemed to turn. But power breeds hunger, and Cyrus was not finished. After conquering ancient kingdoms like Lydia and Babylon, his eyes turned northward toward the windswept plains beyond the Jaxartes River. There, in a land untouched by cities or walls, lived a people who seemed unworthy of his attention. The Massagetae, nomadic warriors who rode with the wind and bowed to no empire. He called them barbarians, but they were free. And among them ruled a woman, a widow, a mother, a warrior named Tomyris. She did not live in palaces or command from gilded halls. She rode beside her warriors, her authority forged not through birthright, but through strength. Her people followed her not because they were commanded to, but because they believed in her. Cyrus, ever the strategist, did not begin with war. Instead, he sent emissaries bearing gifts and words of diplomacy. He proposed marriage. On the surface, it was a gesture of peace, a union between king and queen, a blending of nations without bloodshed. But Tomyris was not deceived. She saw what lay beneath the silken words, not love, but conquest, not alliance, but submission. Her answer was swift and sharp. She would not be wife to a man who sought to rule her. She would not become queen of a conquered people. Her reply echoed across the steppes like the crack of a whip. The Massagetae would remain free. To Cyrus, the refusal was not just unexpected, was intolerable. He had crushed mighty cities and silenced kings. He would not accept defiance from a woman of the plains. And so, what diplomacy could not win, he would take by force. He began to gather his armies. What he did not yet know, what no map or spy could tell him, was that in rejecting him, Tomyris had already drawn the first line in the sand, and it was not a line he would be able to cross twice. Tomyris was not born into legend. She stepped into it, one decision at a time. After the death of her husband, the king of the Massagetae, she could have surrendered power, could have become a quiet figure in the background of tribal politics, but she did not. she rose. And when she did, she ruled not as a figurehead or a widow in mourning, but as a sovereign in full command. Her authority came not from bloodline alone, but from strength proven in her leadership, her voice, and her ability to hold together a people who had never bowed to any king. The Massagetae were no ordinary nation. They were nomads of the Central Asian steppes, hardened by a life lived on horseback beneath an open sky. They had no cities, no palaces, no written laws carved in stone, only the law of the tribe, of loyalty, of honor. To the Persians, they were savages. To themselves, they were free. And it was freedom that Tomyris swore to protect. So when emissaries arrived from Cyrus, the great ruler of the most powerful empire on earth, they brought with them not just gifts and flattering words, but a message wrapped in strategy. Cyrus proposed marriage. It seemed on the surface a gesture of alliance, of diplomacy. If accepted, it would bind the Massagetae to Persia without bloodshed. But Tomyris was not naive. She saw what lay beneath the silk and gold. Submission disguised as union. Conquest without the need for war. To accept would mean the end of her people's independence, their way of life, their soul. Her response was immediate and clear. She refused him. Not out of pride, not even out of anger, but from the unshakable understanding that some things, freedom, dignity, the right to exist without a master heir worth more than peace. She would not be Cyrus's wife. And her people would not be anyone's subjects. To Cyrus, the refusal was more than a diplomatic setback. It was an insult. He had conquered ancient kingdoms, dethroned kings, and been hailed as a liberator by those he spared. He had never been told no. And now, a woman ruling a nomadic tribe in a land of wind and dust had looked him in the eye and rejected him. He would not forget it. And he would not let it stand. With the weight of an empire behind him, Cyrus ordered his generals to prepare for war. The Massagetae would be conquered by force. The river Jaxartes would be crossed. The plains beyond would be claimed. And Tomyris would learn, he believed, what happened to those who denied the will of a god-king. But what Cyrus did not yet understand was that Tomyris was not simply a queen. She was a mother, a warrior, a ruler of people who had never known defeat, never knelt, never broken. And she had already made a choice. If war was to come, then it would be on her terms, and her land would not swallow its enemies quietly. Cyrus did not wait long after Tomyris' refusal. His pride, wounded by her rejection, demanded a swift and overwhelming response. With the confidence of a man who had conquered Babylon, Lydia, and Media, he set his sights on the land beyond the Jaxartes River, determined to make the Massagetae a footnote in the long list of peoples absorbed by his empire. An army was assembled, vast and seasoned, carrying not just weapons but the weight of a king's fury. Tomyris, informed of the impending invasion, responded not with panic but with clarity. She sent Cyrus a final message, measured, prophetic, and firm. She warned him to abandon his plans, to rule his own people and leave hers in peace. For the end of such ambition, she said, could not be known until it arrived. It was not a plea, it was a warning. But Cyrus, drunk on his legend and legacy, dismissed it. He believed no nomadic tribe could challenge him, not even under the command of a queen. Crossing the Jaxartes required more than military might, it demanded strategy. Cyrus had that. And he turned to one of his most trusted advisors, Cyrus, the former king of Lydia, now a Persian counselor. Croesus, having once fallen to Cyrus himself, knew that brute force was not always the most efficient path to victory. He proposed something else, a trap. A deception aimed not at strength, but at culture. The Massagetae, like many steppe peoples, did not drink wine. Their world was built on milk, fermented mare's milk, and simple, practical sustenance. To them, wine was an unknown indulgence. Cyrus saw, in this unfamiliarity, an opportunity. He ordered a decoy camp to be constructed, one filled not with elite soldiers, but with basic rations, rich food, and a seemingly abandoned abundance of wine. Then, his army withdrew into the shadows, waiting. As expected, a small detachment of Massagetae soon discovered the camp. They were led by Spargapises, Tomyris' son. Young, brave, and eager to prove himself, he led his men to what they believed was a careless outpost left behind in retreat. They found little resistance and quickly overran the camp. Victory seemed effortless. But among the spoils, they also found the wine. Unfamiliar with its strength, unaware of its effects, they drank deeply. And as the night deepened, so did their intoxication. Cyrus struck at dawn. His troops descended on the camp with precision and ruthlessness. The Massagetae, disoriented and drunk, stood no chance. Many were slaughtered, others taken prisoner, including Spargapises himself. When the young prince awoke and realized what had happened, shame overwhelmed him. Captured not in battle, but by ignorance, he begged for death. Cyrus, either amused or indifferent, granted his wish. Spargapises took his own life. When the news reached Tomyris, it was not just grief that took hold, it was something colder, something older. The death of a child rewrites a parent's soul. The death of a child by deceit sets fire to the ruins. She did not mourn publicly. She did not weep before her people. Instead, she sent a second message to Cyrus this time, not a warning, but a curse. She told him plainly, "Do not take pride in what you have done, for it was not skill or honor that brought you victory, but winnie poison. You did not defeat my son in battle. You drowned him in intoxication. Leave now," she said, "and I will forgive the blood you've stolen. But if you stay, I will give you what you crave, blood in full. And I will quench your thirst, as you have quenched your empires without mercy." Cyrus received the message, and once again, he ignored it. Cyrus had ignored her final warning. He believed her words were born of sorrow, not strategy spoken from the heart of a grieving mother, not the mind of a leader. But he was wrong. Tomyris was not broken. She was becoming sharper. She knew the Persians had entered her land. She let them. She understood that trying to stop a force like Cyrus head-on would be foolish. So instead, she chose patience. The terrain was hers. Every ridge, every river, every open stretch of grass, she knew them all. And the Persians, for all their discipline and numbers, were strangers here. While Cyrus advanced, she gathered her warriors. The Massagetae did not march like an imperial army. They rode. They moved in silence, in dust, in rhythm with the wind. These were not conscripts or slaves. They were born fighters, men and women who had known hardship from birth and did not fear death. And at their head rode Tomyris. She gave no speech for glory. She promised no spoils. What she offered was vengeance, cold and without mercy. The death of her son had burned away any trace of diplomacy. Now, there was only war. When the moment came, it was sudden and brutal. Massagetae archers struck from a distance, vanishing before the Persians could regroup. Cavalry circled, taunted, then attacked from the flanks. The Persians, trained for siege and open battlefields, struggled to adapt. Their formations were too rigid, their tactics too slow. In the wide, endless plains, Cyrus's strength became his weakness. And yet, he fought. Cyrus did not hide behind his army. He led charges himself, as he always had, determined to turn the tide through sheer will. But even the greatest conqueror cannot outride terrain, tactics, and a mother's fury combined. In the chaos of battle, surrounded by dust, arrows, and cries of war, Cyrus the Great fell. The man who had built the largest empire the world had known, who had ruled from sea to mountain, died far from home, on a plain he could not name, at the hands of a woman who would not kneel. The battle was over. The dust settled slowly over a field littered with broken spears, shattered armor, and the fallen bodies of two great nations. But Tomyris was not searching for trophies. She was searching for one man. Her soldiers combed the battlefield with a single command: find the body of Cyrus. When they did, there was no celebration, only silence. The man who had ruled over millions, who had bent empires to his will, now lay lifeless on foreign soil. His ambitions ended where her vengeance began. Tomyris looked upon him not with triumph, but with something deeper, something colder. This was not a man she had wanted to kill. This was a man who had forced her hand. He had taken her son not in combat, but in deception. And now, she would repay him in kind, not with words, but with blood. She ordered his head to be severed from his body. Then, she brought forth a wineskin not filled with the fermented drink he had used to poison her people, but filled with blood. It was not enough that he had died. He had to be made a lesson. Grasping the head by the hair, she plunged it into the wineskin, letting it sink into the blood as she spoke. "You wanted blood, Cyrus! I live and have conquered you in battle, but you destroyed me by taking my son. Now, as I promised, I quench your thirst for blood." It was not cruelty for its own sake. It was a symbol, a warning carved not in stone, but in flesh. The greatest king of the age, who had spilled rivers of blood in the name of empire, now drowned symbolically in the very thing he craved. His fall was not only military, it was mythic. He had believed himself untouchable. She had reminded the world that no man is. For the Massagetae, this act was not vengeance, it was justice. For history, it became legend. And for the future, it would remain a haunting image. The severed head of Cyrus, immersed in blood, held by a mother who had lost everything, and yet, in that moment, had reclaimed her people's freedom. Cyrus the Great was dead. Word of his fall traveled slowly but surely, moving across deserts, mountains, and cities built in his name. In the heart of Persia, disbelief turned to mourning. In the palaces he once ruled, silence took the place of command. The conqueror of kingdoms had been defeated not by a stronger army or a mightier king, but by a woman the world had dismissed as a barbarian. His body, according to Persian tradition, was eventually recovered and taken to Massagetae, where it was buried in a tomb of stone, simple, solemn, and eternal. But if his body returned, his legend did not. That remained in the hands of Tomyris. She did not march toward Persia. She did not boast of her victory. She did not build an empire on the ruins of another. She returned to the steppe, to the wind and sky, to the people she had sworn to protect. Her vengeance was complete, and with it, her role in history should have ended. But it didn't. Across the ancient world, her name began to spread. To some, she was a savage, queen fierce, vengeful, untamed. To others, she was a symbol of resistance, a leader who stood against tyranny, who refused submission, who won on her own terms. The Greeks, who feared and envied the Persians, took her story as a warning to empire and a celebration of freedom. Writers like Herodotus, though distant in time, recorded her tale with a weaned, perhaps, embellishment. Her act of plunging Cyrus's head into blood became more than a historical detail. It became myth. But even myths leave questions. What happened to Tomyris after the battle? Some say she ruled in peace, that no empire dared test her again. Others claim she was later overthrown, her power fading into the chaos of tribal wars. The truth, as with so many women of history, was not recorded. What remained was her legacy. She had stood alone against the greatest power of her time and won. She had led warriors into battle not for expansion, not for wealth, but to protect what was hers. In doing so, she had carved a place for herself in a world that sought to erase women from its records. The empire she faced would live on, expanded by new kings, reshaped by new wars. But its founder, its god-king, would forever be remembered not for his conquests, but for how he fell. And at the center of that memory stood Tomyris, the queen who did not kneel, the mother who avenged her son, the ruler who proved that no empire is invincible. With Cyrus dead, the empire he had built stone by stone, treaty by treaty, conquest by conquest suddenly stood without its architect. His son, Cambyses II, inherited the throne. But what he inherited in title, he lacked in vision. Cyrus had ruled with both sword and strategy. Cambyses ruled with ambition and impatience. His first obsession was to complete what his father had begun, the conquest of Egypt. It was a goal Cyrus had never reached, and Cambyses was determined to claim it in his name. But in pursuing glory abroad, he neglected the empire at home. Internal tensions began to rise. Local revolts simmered beneath the surface. The delicate balance Cyrus had maintained with religious tolerance, local autonomy, and careful diplomacy began to unravel. Cambyses, unlike his father, ruled with suspicion. His grip was tight, but unsteady. He crushed dissent with force, and force alone cannot hold an empire for long. After his death, chaos followed. A brief and bloody civil war erupted, as rival claimants fought for control. It would take the rise of Darius I, a distant relative and seasoned general, to restore order. Under Darius, the empire would grow once more, but the wound left by Cyrus's death never fully closed. It remained a scar, a silent reminder that even the strongest empire could be brought low, not by a superior army, but by a miscalculation. And that miscalculation had a name: Tomyris. She had not set out to shake the foundations of Persia. She had only wanted to protect her son, her people, her way of life. But in doing so, she forced the empire to confront its limits. She reminded the world that no ruler, not even one called great, is beyond defeat. Her victory did not result in new borders. She did not claim new territory or crown herself Empress of the East. Her power came from saying no and making that no unbreakable. That, in itself, was revolutionary. History often forgets such moments. It records expansion, not resistance, kings, not queens. But the impact of Tomyris was not in what she took, it was in what she denied. She denied submission. She denied fear. And she denied the most powerful man in the world, the one thing he had never been told before: enough. In the end, the Persian Empire survived, but the man who built it did not. His death reshaped its path, slowed its momentum, and haunted its legacy. And in the shadows of history, one truth remained unshaken. An empire may rise through ambition, but it only endures through wisdom. Cyrus had the first. Tomyris forced the second. History does not remember Tomyris through monuments. No statues bear her face. No cities carry her name. She left behind no temples, no written edicts, no royal bloodline that would claim her legacy through titles. And yet, her story endures past through centuries, not by stone but by memory, not by lineage but by awe. She was not a queen who ruled over empires. She ruled over silence, wilderness, and wind. Her kingdom had no borders, only horizons. And yet, in a single act, she defined the limits of power more clearly than any wall ever built. Tomyris did not defeat Cyrus with a larger army, or better weapons, or a divine prophecy. She defeated him with clarity of purpose, of loyalty, of what must never be surrendered. Her strength lay not in conquest, but in refusal. She refused to bow, to be bought, to be tricked. And when her son was taken, she refused to let grief turn her into a victim. She turned it into vengeance. The image that history preserves the severed head of Cyrus plunged into a bag of blood is not merely a moment of brutality. It is a message, a warning, a symbol. It tells us that no matter how vast your empire, how golden your palaces, how many lands sing your name, all of it can be undone by one clear no. And that sometimes it is not ambition that changes the course of history, but defiance. The Persians went on. They rebuilt, regrouped, expanded, but they never forgot Tomyris. Neither did the Greeks, who used her story as a mirror to reflect the vulnerability of empire. Neither did the Romans, who cited her as proof that fate does not favor the proud, and neither should we. Because Tomyris' story is not just about ancient wars or forgotten lands. It is about power and how it breaks, about grief and how it becomes strength, about empires and how even the greatest can be humbled by courage, by conviction, by a woman with nothing left to lose. Long after her bones returned to the earth and the Massagetae vanished from maps, the wind still blows across those endless steppes. It carries no banners, no anthems, no names carved in stone. But it carries something deeper. The echo of a vow kept. The silence of an empire stopped. The legacy of a queen who drew the lineage and never let it be crossed.